Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Today, the game is different.
I want to gamble. Gambling is a very serious business.
Is that clear?
Welcome to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you here, deep from the swamps of Jersey. We got a great show coming up for you. Sports betting has expanded at an incredible rate in the United States. A lot of us place bets on football or baseball or golf without really knowing how the industry works. Well, a new book out there shines a bright light on the sports betting industry and how the odds are really stacked against sports bettors out there. The name of the book is Everybody Loses: The Tumultuous Rise of American Sports Gambling, and it's written by Danny Funt. Danny is a contributor at the Washington Post, and his reporting has also appeared in the New Yorker, the Wall Street Journal, and the Columbia Journalism Review. Danny's reporting gives the public a never-before-seen look of how the sports betting industry really works. When we come back, we're talking with Danny Funt. So stick around. We'll be right back with House of Cards. Hey, Dave Weishuttle from House of Cards. I just got my Dugout mug delivered, and I am loving it. Dugout mugs are mugs made out of baseball bats, and they are officially licensed by Major League Baseball so you can get your favorite baseball team's logo on your mug. Just think of it, enjoying your favorite drink while watching your favorite baseball team with your team's logo on your mug made from a baseball bat. They can even make customized mugs. Check out the mug they made for House of Cards. I mean, just look at that. That looks awesome. I've never seen anything like them. If you go to dugoutmugs.com, you'll find out they even make more things than mugs. They have baseball board games, grilling equipment made from baseball bats. They even have a section for gifts for under $30. Head on over to dugoutmugs.com because if you're a baseball fan or need a gift for a baseball fan, you have to check out Dugout Mugs. And use our promo code PIKE at checkout to get 20% off your purchase price. That's promo code PIKE, P-I-K-E. Also, free shipping with orders over $99. You can't beat that. DugoutMugs.com. That's my go-to place if I need a gift for a baseball fan. Well, if you excuse me now, the game is about to go on, and the wind is just right for drinking. Hey, this is Dave Weishuttle from House of Cards with your House of Cards gaming report for the week of July 20th, 2026. Aristocrat Gaming has introduced NFL Super Grand Champions onto casino floors across North America. The game retains the central feature of the NFL Slots franchise by allowing casino players to choose any team, anytime, at any game location. The rollout began with launch events at Pechanga Resort Casino and WinStar World Casino and Resort, while U.S. distribution is ongoing. Las Vegas's last remaining Sigma Derby mechanical horse racing game can now be played at its new home at the Golden Gate Hotel and Casino. Players place coin wagers on miniature horses as they race around the circular track, usually to the sound of cheering people around the table. The game moved from Fremont Street Experience on June 16th in front of hundreds of spectators who watched miniature horses and the UNLV marching band. And finally, a lucky visitor from Atlanta hit it big at the Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino. The lucky person had been playing the IGT Megabucks Wolf Run Eclipse slot machine for about 3 minutes when their $5 wager hit a huge jackpot. That player won a jackpot of over $10.2 million, making it one of the largest slot jackpots won at Westgate. According to the press release, the winner celebrated with fellow guests and the casino team. That's one heck of a win. Have any news or tips regarding casinos, gaming, or legislation? Send us an email at newsroom@houseofcardsradio.com and follow us on X at HOC Radio.
You're listening to House of Cards. Check us out at houseofcardsradio.com.
We must get her back.
I'll be satisfied if we get her half back.
I'll take a quarterback.
In fact, I'll take Notre Dame in 2 points.
Oh, you want 2 points?
I certainly do.
Well, you got 'em.
Oh!
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you here. House of Cards is brought to you by BetMGM Casino. Play your favorite casino games at BetMGM Online Casino. Go to BetMGM Casino, create an account using our promo code Turnpike, and become a verified player. New players get $25 free when signing up, plus a first deposit bonus up to $1,000. That's promo code Turnpike at BetMGM.com for a 100% deposit match up to $1,000 plus $25 free. Must be 21 years or older to place a bet. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. I'm excited to talk to our next guest because, in my opinion, he has written one of the best books on the sports betting industry ever. Look, I'm a gaming attorney. I have interviewed a lot of people in the sports betting industry, and this book is the most honest and most in-depth view of this industry that's out there. The name of the book is Everybody Loses, The Tumultuous Rise of American Sports Gambling. The author is Danny Funt, who is a contributor at the Washington Post. You might have seen his writing in the New Yorker, the Wall Street Journal, and the Columbia Journalism Review. And we are lucky to have Danny on the line with us right now. Danny, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you.
First off, and I said this off air, but I want to say it on air, congratulations on an amazing book. Everybody Loses is an absolutely amazing book, and everyone who bets on sports or is thinking about betting on sports should read this because it's an incredible look at the sports betting industry. Now you've been reporting on the sports betting industry for a while. Why now at this point did you decide it's time to write a book on the subject? Was there something that you saw or heard that motivated you to think that, you know what, this is the time when people need to hear about this?
There were a few things. I would say, for one, as proud as I am of my reporting in the Washington Post and elsewhere, I felt like I was just scratching the surface. I didn't feel like me or my colleagues across media had really gotten to the bottom of why exactly the pro sports leagues had this profound change of heart where they suddenly became sports betting's biggest champions after speaking about it in the most biblical negative terms possible for decades. That just continued to confound me, and I felt with some investigative reporting I could shed light on that. And the other thing was I was frustrated that the sports books, particularly the two biggest ones, FanDuel and DraftKings, don't really cooperate with interviews. Definitely not interviews that aren't promotional. Sure. And I wanted to understand what it's like to work there, for one, but also to hear from people at those companies about how they think about customers, how they think about their business, how they respond to criticisms that we all hear of the way the industry is taking shape. And even if they didn't end up cooperating in a formal capacity, I could still, with enough time, cultivate sources throughout the business. And I was very proud and grateful that so many people were willing to talk to me ultimately. So those were the two main things. And then lastly, I wouldn't say it motivated the book, but it did kind of make me say, this maybe would be an interesting takeaway for some people, or unexpected takeaway, which was hearing from people in the industry about how few companies are actually turning a profit. Yeah. And how, the thought was the house always wins. This is a slam dunk business. It's been that way elsewhere in the world. The fact that 60 companies flooded the marketplace around 2018, 2019 suggested a lot of people thought they could, turn this into a good business. That hasn't been the case. And that story I thought was interesting. And I closed the book with some of that. But yeah, all those reasons just felt like this was crying out for a book.
Now, gambling has been around for a very long time, and you rightly point out that it's mentioned in the Bible and the Quran, and the settlement of Jamestown might not have been successful if not for a lottery in England. So people have always gambled on something throughout history. But in the United States, did widespread legalized sports betting trace its origins to daily fantasy sports? I mean, in your book, Jason Robbins from DraftKings referred to daily fantasy as the Trojan horse, which helped the company transition into legalized sports betting. I know a couple of lawmakers actually told me daily fantasy was the gateway drug to sports betting. But would we have widespread legalized sports betting if not for daily fantasy sports?
No, I doubt it. If they're number one, a close second is the online poker boom and the growth of the offshore betting industry, with all these very high profile websites that would take people's bets basically from the moment there was an internet. And then definitely into the 2010s when this all exploded. But no, you're right. Daily fantasy normalized risking money on sports for a lot of people who might have been reluctant to use some sketchy offshore website, or when online poker existed in this kind of gray area legally, they might have been wary of that. But the idea that companies like FanDuel and DraftKings were partnering with pro sports, were advertising constantly, and also the fact that it just took the best part of fantasy sports, you might say, drafting, choosing your lineup, and just condensed that. So that was the whole ball game. That was very appealing. But, a lot of people assumed, even up till the point that the Supreme Court struck down PASPA, the federal ban on bookmaking outside Nevada, and all this took off, people assumed that companies like Caesars and Wynn and MGM would ultimately crush the DFS operators just because they clearly know how to run a sports book and a casino business. And that just wasn't the case because FanDuel and DraftKings had such a head start, perfecting their technology, forming those partnerships with teams and leagues, even the brand awareness that that's the place you go to bet on sports. I remember talking to someone in marketing at Caesars who said, a lot of our customers are old ladies who play slots. So it did not ring a bell for people that if you want to, tap into this new opportunity to gamble legally on sports, a company like Caesars was the place to do it. So in fact, they had FanDuel and DraftKings kind of had an insurmountable lead thanks to DFS.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Your Majesty, the royal wrestlers await.
I'll bet on the little guy.
How much?
3,000 guineas, 2 geese, and a duck.
That's a foul bet.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Danny Funt, author of Everybody Loses, The Tumultuous Rise of American Sports Gambling. You mentioned the U.S. Supreme Court in 2018 striking down PASPA, and I don't think anyone predicted the numbers and money involved with the sports betting industry that we're seeing right now. And I have never seen such an abrupt change in business plans for media companies and professional leagues that I have seen with regard to sports betting. Let me first ask you about how media approached sports betting. And one of the companies that really took to sports betting was Disney and ESPN. It was just amazing what they were doing. How did the media landscape change when sports betting became legal in this country?
Yeah, at the outset, I mentioned I wanted to get to the bottom of why the leagues changed their tune so suddenly. But their media partners, it's just as stark of a 180, and it's a similarly important aspect of this, because I really don't think betting would have become as widespread and normalized were it not for the enthusiastic endorsement of companies like ESPN and their parent Disney. It's funny. I have this section in the book about after Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, published this op-ed in 2014, coming out in favor of legalization, which came as a huge shock to the other leagues and basically everyone who cares about sports, because his predecessor, David Stern, had detested the thought of gambling, and all of the leagues were aligned on that at that time. After that op-ed, the gambling industry started commissioning these Nielsen studies to assess just how much money the leagues would stand to make if gambling were legalized, based largely on what it would do to TV audiences. And they were meeting with all the leagues very secretively, and they were also meeting with their broadcasting partners. And I got a kick out of the fact that with the NFL and Disney, probably the two most staunchly opposed institutions at that point, these meetings were, they insisted on holding them in cafes on Park Avenue rather than at the league offices or at Disney's offices, just because the thought of having a gambling representative in their building was intolerable to them. So as secretive as that was, it got to them that this would be such a moneymaker, particularly because all of these companies are worried about long-term, people are cutting the cord on cable subscriptions. Young people don't want to sit through a 3-hour game, especially with something like baseball. The pace of play was becoming a big problem for people with shortened attention spans. The average audience age was getting a lot older over the past decade or so. So the idea that you could turbocharge viewership with gambling proved very appealing. And I talked to people at ESPN and other companies, and, they just described for so long, journalists just wanted nothing to do with gambling by and large. Like, yeah, you had guys like Brent Musburger and Al Michaels who sort of make winking references at the odds. You had Jimmy the Greek back in the day, but this was largely not a part of sports coverage. And as soon as all this, flood of advertising came in at a time when sports media was fighting for survival in a lot of ways and laying people off and just not in a position to stand on principle and turn away a ton of new money, all of that changed very quickly. As different people who worked in that put it, that the money was too good to pass up. And the consequences of that are profound.
Let me ask you about the league. We talked about this before we went on air. I'm sitting here in New Jersey, and that's where the court case came out of. And on a daily basis, when the court case was going on, the leagues are telling people that there's no greater thing you can do that's worse in the world than put a bet on sports. And it's just an amazing turnaround that we saw from the leagues. I mean, the leagues went from talking about integrity of the games, then they were asking for an integrity fee, and then they just said, yeah, you can be official partners and use our data. I mean, in your book, the NFL had a betting advisor as a consultant to a couple of NFL teams. I'm talking about Warren Sharp. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. I mean, certainly when sports betting became widespread, they had to get involved. But are you surprised how entwined the leagues have gotten with the sports betting industry? I mean, could you have envisioned the sports landscape as it is today from 2018?
No, I think it's pretty remarkable. And by the way, the book is not a history book, as you know, but I felt like some of the backstory to this was essential to understand where things are today, and also just so fascinating. I didn't want to shortchange that. It's only a couple chapters, but I just loved understanding, how things actually got off the ground in New Jersey, why exactly Chris Christie got on board after some hesitation at first, how him squaring off with people like Bill Bradley, the U.S. Senator and former New York Knicks legend, and David Stern, who was from New Jersey, all of that was just a really interesting story I found. But yeah, and this was so immediate. And as I mentioned, the leagues had already been converted into gambling proponents before the Supreme Court decision, even though they were the parties in that case fighting supposedly to preserve PASPA. But they had this strategy session that their lobbyist coined Project Aftermath, which was, if the court rules against us, we're going to act as fast as possible to cash in on this. And they had already linked up with the firm that was representing the lobbying firm called Oric that was representing FanDuel and DraftKings. And they had this very coordinated strategy so that FanDuel and DraftKings were in hot water at that point in a lot of states because they had been flouting gambling laws, and attorneys general had tried to shoo them out of their states. So they wouldn't be the most effective champions for betting bills after the court decision. But the leagues, who doesn't want to meet with a league, let alone get to go to a game or hang out with retired greats who are still on the league's payroll, or all that stuff was just very enticing state by state. So the leagues were extremely hands-on in not just getting legalization, but getting the bills that were written by FanDuel and DraftKings to be basically what most states ended up passing. They also very clearly wanted their cut. And I thought it was such a great kind of owning that when Adam Silver, you might remember that as legalization was taking off, the leagues wanted what they called an integrity fee.
Yeah.
Which was basically saying it's going to cost us a lot of money to make sure that our games aren't corrupted by all this gambling. So we should be paid, to account for that burden that we're accepting as a result of this new industry. And people like State Senator Steve Sweeney in New Jersey just blasted that as greedy and ridiculous. But at one point, Adam Silver was giving a press conference and he said, yeah, we're calling it an integrity fee, but you could basically think of it as a royalty. These are our games. We should get a piece if you're making money off our games. So they owned, even if that, maybe, I don't know if that was more of a slip of the tongue or something he actually wanted to get out there, but they owned that. They just felt, you're not going to mooch off our games and make billions of dollars without us getting our share. And although they didn't get the integrity fee, they got states to mandate that they would get paid for their official league data, which is basically just live game stats that the operators need to offer betting that's, dependable, using the most objective stats possible to determine the outcomes of bets. So that was a huge moneymaker, but in so many other ways, they could not just, I know I'm being a little long-winded here, but there's just so many ways in which the leagues have integrated their business in that of gambling. Like they could have said, well, I guess it's legal now, but what can you do? But we're not going to promote it. And in fact, they promote it as aggressively as anyone.
The one thing that was really striking about your book for me are the tools the sportsbooks use to drive business. And one of those tools the sportsbook use to drive business for sports betting is the use of affiliates. And they're the cost per acquisition affiliates, or the CPAs, that a lot of people go to. I probably have some newsletters from them in my inbox right now. So it's just, they're just everywhere. And you bring up a very interesting situation with regard to affiliates. Some write articles and give advice on how to bet, and in turn, they get paid in some cases when bettors lose, which is an incredibly important point because a lot of people out there don't know that they're taking advice from an entity that's get paid from their losses. I mean, how aware were the customers and consumers of that fact, and what did you learn by talking with these affiliates?
I thought this was just a crazy side of the business. I didn't appreciate the extent of it, and I felt like people would love hearing how this really works. So, there's a lot of aspects of e-commerce now where, like, you click on a restaurant review. If there's a link to the restaurant, they might get the place that reviewed the restaurant might get a commission if you book a table, or like New York Times Wirecutter. If you buy a vacuum, they'll get a piece from Amazon as a result of you clicking on that link. But generally, I don't think that's too problematic, just because everyone's interests are kind of aligned. Amazon wants to sell you a vacuum, you want to buy one, and the New York Times wants to make sure you buy a good one, so you keep coming back to the Times. That, I think, is reasonably legit, ethically speaking. Yeah. The problem with sports betting is that media that's giving out saying, hey, you should bet on this, or here's the best sports books that you might want to sign up for, or even something as simple as like, here's some insights into the game that might help you place smarter bets. All of that gives the impression that they're on the bettor's side. And of course, the bettor's in competition with the house. So it's like, the media is saying we're your allies to help you make money. But the fact of the matter couldn't be more the opposite. At the high point of the race for market share after a state legalizes, and this was particularly aggressive in the tri-state area just because that was such a valuable region for customer acquisition. You were seeing sports books paying $500 or $600 for every customer who clicked a link and then went and signed up for an account, which is incredible. That's way more than the commissions that you'd see for some of those other businesses I described earlier. That is as generous as that was. There was also what were called revenue share deals where, again, let's say you're on a newspaper's website and you click a link for FanDuel and you sign up. FanDuel might have paid the newspaper somewhere like 30 to 45% of your lifetime losses, your net losses on FanDuel, which could be a ton of money, over the course of a customer's life on that site. That is just such a conflict of interest to say, hey, here's some advice to help you win money, but in reality, we're getting paid for the money you lose. And I spoke with people who facilitated those deals. There's a guy at Rowan University named Mike Rosenstein who was working at one of these affiliate companies that was partnering with a lot of newspapers at the time. And he said, yeah, we'd sometimes have a disclaimer that said, if you click a link, we'll get a commission, but we wanted that to be as vague and subtle as possible. We didn't want to broadcast very loudly, hey, we are making money off your losses, even though that was the reality of it. And again, just to this question of why, after so many years of not wanting to promote gambling, and newspapers might have mentioned the point spreads or even had a column about gambling in some cases, it was not the main way that they covered sports. Why did that change? And the affiliate business was a big piece of it. Just this getting commissions on customer referrals to that degree was irresistible for so many companies.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards. Sign up at jackpot.com and you can bet on the world's best lotteries where the biggest jackpots are up for grabs. Powerball, Mega Millions, some of the biggest lotteries can be found at jackpot.com. Simply choose your lotto game, pick your numbers, or use their quick pick feature, and you're done. Sign up at jackpot.com with code DRAW24 and get a free lottery ticket with your first deposit. Jackpot.com, it's the world of lotto in your hand. Terms and conditions apply. You must be at least 18 years old and in the United States to play. Void where prohibited. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
In a moment of need, every second counts. So first responders, delivery drivers, and visitors can find your home fast, even in the dark. This is about more than just a number. It's about safety, visibility, and peace of mind. We created a house number that is not only a beacon of safety, but also a work of art. Crafted from durable stainless steel and waterproof acrylic, with efficient, low-voltage LED backlighting, it's uniquely yours. Choose from 6 sizes, 4 fonts, and 6 colors, and match your home's mood with bright, neutral, or warm white halo lighting. Add dusk to dawn, dimming and timing controls for complete command.
Every order includes free worldwide shipping, plus a 2-year warranty on lighted numbers and all powering accessories.
This is the ultimate home upgrade. A perfect blend of style, quality, and function.
Buy yours today.
You're listening to the House of Cards.
Is that good? Do I want that?
Oh yeah, you want that.
Well, fantastic then.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Danny Funt, author of Everybody Loses, The Tumultuous Rise of American Sports Gambling. Now, I've had professional bettors tell me that sports betting is the only industry that awards you for doing poorly. And what they're talking about, you know, sharps don't get VIP status, and they usually get their betting limited. Let me ask you about people who get VIP status, which was one of the more eye-opening portions of the book. They're not considered sharp bettors, which means they lose a lot. I mean, I'm trying to put it in a nicer way, but usually if you win a lot of money, you're not going to be a VIP, and you're not going to get free stuff from the sports books. When someone is betting with a sports book and they are offered VIP status, what should they be looking out for? I mean, tell us the role of the host of the VIP status holder and what bettors have to be wary of in terms of VIP programs and sports books, because that was such an eye-opening portion of your book.
I'm glad you felt that way, because I was my favorite chapter to write, just because I too was shocked by how that business works. It's people who get VIP status as sports bettors are exclusively losing. Mm-hmm. This was different with DFS, Daily Fantasy, because the house just took the equivalent of a rake in poker. It didn't matter if a customer was winning or losing. Just the fact that they were pouring money into these platforms was good enough for them to become a VIP. But with sports betting, all it means is that you're losing a ton of money consistently. Usually at minimum thousands of dollars a week, and often much, much more than that. There was someone in the Northeast who is thought to have lost more than $100 million betting on sports online. He's probably the biggest loser in the online betting era. But yeah, these customers lose so much that the companies devote hundreds of employees to catering to their every need and also showering them with just some incredible perks. Mm-hmm. And going back to this issue of are they losers or not, there's a lot of perks that involve sports that are just like your dream come true experience if you're a sports fan, a lot that has nothing to do with sports that are just incredible experiences that you might get. But as it relates to sports, one that I just couldn't believe was that a lot of these VIPs get to throw out the first pitch at a Major League Baseball game.
I saw that, yeah.
I had always thought that was like, a celebrity or a dignitary or just someone who deserves recognition, not just someone who loses a lot of money gambling. And someone who is a VIP host at one of these companies said, when you see that, you'll hear them announced as, today throwing out the first pitch is a representative of DraftKings, let's say. And he said, they're not, they call you representative because they're not going to tell the stadium, today we have one of the biggest losers at DraftKings here to throw out the first pitch. But that's the reality of it. And just, I'll say to your point about if you're winning, you're absolutely not going to get this treatment. It can be so ruthless how quickly the flip switches. And an example of that I give in the book is there was this guy in Ohio who was a VIP with Fanatics, which has become one of the kind of mid-tier operators across the country. And he told them, I'm a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and they're playing I can't remember if it was the Browns or the Bengals, but they're coming to Ohio, and I'd love to go to that game if you could hook me up with tickets for me and my wife. Mm-hmm. And his rep at Fanatics was like, absolutely, we got you. Here's some great seats. Have fun. He didn't hear from them for a while, and the game was a few days away, and he said, hey, would you mind throwing in a parking pass? Can't wait to go to the game. And they wrote back very casually to say, we're sorry to say that we had to revoke those tickets because you've been betting on football in a way that does not fit our requirements for being a Fanatics VIP. So sorry about that. If things change and you go back to betting the way you were, we can make it up to you and get you tickets down the road. But for now, you're no longer a VIP, and we can't give you those tickets anymore. And he hadn't broken any rules. He hadn't been, doing some of the tricks that sharp bettors use to get an edge. He'd just been placing savvy bets on football, and that was enough to disqualify him from being a VIP and getting those tickets. And I just thought that was kind of cold-blooded.
I remember that section of the book, and I was thinking, boy, if he didn't call for a parking pass, how would he even know they revoked his tickets?
I know. He would have just gone
amazing.
to will call, and they would have said, yeah, we don't have your name, but, see you later.
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, and you mentioned it, when sports betting started in the U.S., it was the goal of the sports books to acquire customers. And at one point, a couple years back, they kind of changed their way of business, thinking, hey, now we have to start making money. And that's when micro betting and showed up. That's when parlays started to become more prevalent. That's when same game parlays really showed up. I actually had one sports book executive tell me, parlays don't build bankrolls, they build sports books. I mean, they weren't even trying to hide it. I mean, that just like a blatant way of getting customers to shell out more money? I know a lot of them couch it in terms of, hey, we got these new AI programs and we're talking about customization for bettors and the bets that they want. Their parlays are built for them. Was that just a blatant attempt? It was fascinating how they mixed that kind of money grab with marketing speak.
Definitely. And I was surprised to even hear from a former executive at DraftKings that he didn't anticipate how big parlays would become in the betting business. You see, it's such a prominent way they advertise now. I remember, as one example, as the leadoff hitter in the last game, Game 7 of the past World Series between the Dodgers and Blue Jays, this epic Game 7. And, literally seconds before the first pitch, Fox says, and by the way, you can go bet this parlay on FanDuel that we think is a good bet for you. So it's clearly the type of bet they're pushing on customers. It's also just substantially more profitable than traditional betting against the spread or single game betting. That typically made the house about $5 for every $100 wagered. Parlays can make them as much as $30 for every 100 wagered. And, there's a lot in the book that's about, the dangers of all this and how the industry is being predatory in some respects. But I also just enjoyed learning about how this actually works.
Yeah.
And I found in particular this insight that a huge growth sector in the online betting industry has been same game parlays, stacking a bunch of props in one game, and how you basically couldn't do this previously because the odds are correlated and it's very tricky to determine exactly how to price those correlations. Like, if you're betting on a quarterback to throw 3 touchdowns, a receiver to have under 100 yards, and the other team to score less than 14 points, like all of those events happening or not happening will influence the odds of the other ones happening. And if you're offering thousands of props on every game, there's millions and millions of potential same game parlays you could construct. So figure out the odds is just unbelievably challenging from a bookmaking standpoint. It's why that really wasn't something you could get in Las Vegas or even through, your street bookie. And FanDuel, which had been acquired by a company in the UK that had been doing those sorts of parlays with soccer for a while, they just had such a leg up at figuring out that technology. And they also hired data scientists who were very good at running simulations to gauge those probabilities. So typically they'll just run a simulation of a game 10,000 times. and count how many times. So if the quarterback throws 2 touchdowns, how many times did the receiver not get 100 yards, and set the odds accordingly. And I found that just fascinating from a bookmaking standpoint. But they also bake in a much more substantial VIG to protect themselves from the imprecision of trying to predict all that. And because of that, these are sucker bets by and large. Like no one, if you're sharp and you pick up an oversight in a correlation, that can be a good way to make money in the short term. And there's some funny examples of that in the book. Mm-hmm. But by and large, sharp bettors don't bother with same game parlays. And yet they're all a lot of people bet nowadays, just because it's a lot more fun to be sweating a whole bunch of different things during a game. The idea of turning $20 into $2,000 or whatever is very appealing, but they're bad bets. And because so many people in media are being paid to tout those bets, I don't think that has dawned on many customers. The last thing I'll say is I also don't think it's dawned on them that they seem to think if I were just to win one of those bets, it would make up for all my losers. And it just doesn't work that way. And I spoke with the former head of product at FanDuel, who said, the quote was, not to be condescending, but I would guess 5% of customers actually understand that the house edge on parlays is so much bigger than straight bets. And that's the brilliance of that product. And it's why it's by far their biggest moneymaker right now.
The one thing you also covered in the book that sportsbooks do that infuriates a lot of bettors and infuriates a lot of sharps is, when sportsbooks try to void bets, which is a nightmare for any bettor. And the excuse the sportsbook uses, we made an obvious mistake in their numbers, and then they try and void a bet. I mean, the whole idea about placing a bet is doing your research, coming up with your own numbers, seeing an obvious place where the sportsbooks potentially have gotten it wrong, or their numbers don't score with the numbers you think they should be, so you make a bet. I mean, that's the whole idea about sports betting. But it was a fascinating discussion and stories about sportsbooks attempting to void bets.
I love that. And again, there is some ethical stuff at hand about customers getting screwed over, but I also just think philosophically it's very interesting because there's always been an understanding that if it's a clear, what they call a fat finger, like let's say the total on a basketball game should be 200, the combined score of the two teams, let's say the over-under is 200, and they accidentally hit an extra zero and put it at 2,000. Should they have to pay out bets if people took the under on that? That's debatable, but the conventional wisdom had been no. But because they're offering such an absurd menu of props and an even more absurd menu of potential same-game parlays, as we were discussing, and it's so hard to set those odds, what exactly is an obvious error is really in the eye of the beholder, and very debatable. New Jersey, it's noteworthy, at least under the previous gaming commissioner, I have no reason to believe his successor feels differently, took a very hard line on that and said, basically, if it's in the realm of possibility that a bet could go either way, it's not an obvious error. So, like, for example, if they said the shortest field goal will be 3 yards, well, you literally can't kick a field goal less than 17 yards, right? If you snapped it at the 1 yard line, it would be this 18-yard field goal. So that doesn't make any sense. But if you said the shortest field goal will be 99 yards, then you got to own that, because theoretically you could kick a 110-yard field goal. So that was kind of saying they didn't want sportsbooks to be sloppy and just trying to offer way more things than they could manage and then voiding bets when they made a mistake. Because, as you were saying, kind of the whole point of sports betting is to identify mispriced odds and attack that. That's the game. So it's kind of ridiculous to say you were shrewd in picking off, good bets to place, and we're going to void those bets after the fact, because they definitely don't void losing bets when they figure out that this was a mispriced line that they hung. So yeah, it's pretty some of the leeway that they've been given elsewhere in the country is absurd. Like I cite a couple examples where people attacked some bad odds in 2 different states. Like they did it in Florida, and then they told their buddy in Ohio, hey, hit this doesn't make sense. And one state, allowed the bets and one state didn't. That happens all the time. It just goes to show kind of how arbitrary this is, and how maybe except for a place like New Jersey that has a long history of regulating different forms of betting, a lot of states are kind of naive about this, and there's a big learning curve for the regulators there. A lot of the regulators don't come from sports betting. They come from the lottery, or they're even just retired cops who don't know, the ins and outs of the online betting business, and something like a palpable error, or an obvious error as it's sometimes called, is new to them. So, and the sports books are taking advantage of that, because if they tend to err on the side of what the sportsbook wants and not what the customer is saying should be fair.
Stay tuned for more House of Cards.
You're listening to the House of Cards.
Why, you cheap crook, stealing a baby's bank.
It's only a lend-lease. I figured to bet on the 50-to-1 shot and double the baby's money.
Why, you imbecile. Why don't you pick 100-to-1 shot and triple it?
Oh, okay.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Danny Funt, author of Everybody Loses, The Tumultuous Rise of American Sports Gambling. Now, in the news lately, there's been a bunch of betting scandals, both at the collegiate and professional levels. I mean, from my standpoint, I'm hearing both sides of the issue, and both sides are using these to further their side of the debate. I mean, opponents of sports betting are saying, see, this is what happens when you have sports betting. Then the people in favor of sports betting say, sports betting has been around even though it hasn't been legal. I mean, and fixing games have always happened. And Tim Donaghy, they always point to it, and you give a lengthy recap of the Tim Donaghy story, and it was interesting to read that again with the eye of, okay, now sports betting is legal. But people who are in favor of sports betting are saying, sports betting is legal now, and that's how we caught them. We have a process to find out irregularities in sports betting, and we have the mechanisms in place to stop it. I mean, either way how you interpret these scandals, this has really affected the way we all watch sports. I mean, it was amazing to see the stories of people who were bettors and that are not bettors and see sports in a whole different way.
Absolutely. It's one of the best examples of why this has big consequences for all sports fans, even if you're not gambling, because they're still learning about fixing scandals, and they're still increasingly cynical as a result about the legitimacy of what they're watching. I do think it's a little bit disingenuous that the industry and the leagues, for partnering with them, kind of want to have it both ways, where if time passes without a fixing scandal coming to light, they'll say, look, all of these concerns were overblown. Nothing bad is happening. And when they do catch someone, they say, thank God for legalization. Otherwise, we wouldn't have caught this person.
Yeah.
It feels like having it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I went into detail with the Donaghy scandal. It's probably the worst betting crime of the 21st century in terms of just being devastating for faith in what we're watching on the court, because the point was, okay, the argument for legalization was it would make it a lot harder to fix games and a lot easier to catch people fixing. If we took the most notorious example of that, would anything be different nowadays? And the obvious answer is no. He was working with a very sophisticated gambling syndicate that was betting in Asia and Latin America, had a whole system of wink, wink stuff to communicate with him on burner phones using code, and they were very careful. So do we really think that now they would just log into FanDuel and place those bets? Absolutely not. It's ridiculous to think that. And when I asked one of the top executives at the company that's responsible for what's called integrity monitoring, the surveillance of betting activity to make sure suspicious bets aren't being placed and to investigate bets that look fishy, he said exactly that. You know, there's sophisticated fixers are still going to go through the black market, and we would have a very difficult time spotting that. And by the way, one of the ways that you flag a suspicious bet is just if a ton of money is being placed on something that you wouldn't think would attract a ton of money. Like if it's a, Division II college basketball game and someone bets $1 million, you might want to look into that. But he pointed out that you can win a lot of money on parlays by betting a reasonably modest amount of money. And that wouldn't necessarily set off alarm bells. So the fact that you can now win so much on parlays that never used to exist, he conceded is kind of a blind spot for this integrity monitoring. It seems obvious, and yet I still found it striking to hear from NBA agents, not just NBA, but agents in all the sports, athletes, the players union, former league executives, and again, these integrity monitors, saying it's way too easy now to fix a game. It's borderline impossible to catch everyone who's fixing. And these sorts of scandals are just going to be inevitable now. And also just for the fact that athletes are seeing these ads constantly. So the idea of gambling is on their minds like never before. That temptation is just dangling in front of them at all times. But the other thing about this that I find maybe even more worrisome is that these integrity monitors are presented as independent. You hear that word a lot in press releases and just how it's discussed publicly. Like, we have these independent vendors that are protecting the credibility of our games. In reality, they could not be less independent. The leagues have ownership stakes in those companies. They have very lucrative deals with them, not just to provide that service, but even more so to distribute. We were talking about official league data. Mm-hmm. The companies that are responsible for distributing that data, which is how they make most of their money, is the integrity monitors. Really, integrity monitoring is like a side business for them. And their big moneymaker is distributing league data to sports books and media companies around the world. So when you think about the fact that the leagues have an equity stake in those companies, and that those companies make a huge amount of their money from the business of online sports betting, think of the conflict of interest. If they ever found a really damaging scandal, there would be so much incentive to brush that under the rug.
Yeah.
And I heard that from an agent and from other people who said it would kill the league and the betting business if a superstar were found fixing or a major game were found to have been fixed. There would be it would be so within the realm of possibility that the public would never hear about that for that reason.
One of the big issues now in sports betting is the idea of responsible gaming. And in your book, you talk about Dan Trolero and Daniel Umfleet from Kindbridge. Both have been on the show and both have been doing amazing things helping combat.
Cool.
Yeah, no, they are doing great work. And one of the issues I've heard about with regard to responsible gambling is, yeah, sports books have procedures to deal with problem gambling, but that's only after you get into some real trouble with regard to gambling. I mean, I think it's great that we're talking more about problem gambling than we did in the past, but what more can be done with regard to the issue? I mean, should sports books be looking into how much a person can afford to bet? I mean, when they see a bettor depositing more than they should or more often than they should they be stepping in sooner than they have been in the past? Where do you see this issue headed in the future?
To skip ahead to the conclusion, I would say the operators have demonstrated they can't be trusted to self-police on this. Their messaging is, we've got this under control. We're looking out for responsible gambling, and we don't need further regulations to enforce that. We can handle it. I think that's really dubious, and there's so many examples why. Honestly, one that might sound superficial, but I think it actually is quite important, is just their unwillingness to call it responsible gambling. Insisting on gaming as the word of choice to describe this activity, I think, is a deliberate effort to mask the risks involved with gambling. And I heard that from all sorts of people, including in the industry, who said, we've known for decades that gambling brings to mind, for one, casinos, and just you wouldn't want to spend too much time in a casino, but also stories of people whose lives have been upended and, have lost their spouse or their job or even their life because of a gambling problem. Whereas gaming sounds innocent and harmless, and maybe nowadays it even evokes video games. So that feels like a much gentler word to use to describe what this is. Calling it responsible gaming, I think, is really counterproductive. But beyond that, there are a lot of standards elsewhere in the world that, by the way, a lot of these companies operate in abroad. Many of them are based in Europe, so they know those rules, and they just choose not to follow them in the U.S. because they don't have to. But there are things like, for one, not using misleading promotions, like calling a promotion risk-free if there's risk involved, dangling really generous sounding deals to seduce people to sign up for sports betting seems pretty irresponsible to me, especially if it's as outright deceptive as using a phrase like risk-free when that's definitely not the case. But also in other parts of the world, you have to pay a vendor to study bettors' habits and pick up on trends that might be signs of a gambling problem, like if you're chasing losses or betting at odd hours of the day or depositing a lot of money every time you lose, in a very frenetic manner. All of that stuff might be reason to check in on a customer and say, hey, we've got these resources, or do you want to take a break? That largely doesn't exist in the US. Another thing might be when you sign up or when you start betting, inviting people to set a limit on how much they want to be able to deposit, let's say over a month. That's the norm in Europe. It's not really the standard practice here. They do have those tools, but they know darn well if you have to click a bunch of times to get to the tool, people are a lot less likely to use them. Whereas, again, it's something that is just part of signing up overseas. We could go on and on, but there's a ton of not just consumer protections, but ways in which the industry could encourage responsible gambling that they're not doing right now. And the reason why I heard from a top responsible gambling official at one of these large sports books was, as they put it, anything beyond the bare minimum for consumer protections, their phrase was, it's seen as a competitive disadvantage in these companies. And when you hear that, when you hear them say, anything beyond the bare minimum is something that we feel is just going to hurt us in our in our competition with these other operators, that doesn't inspire confidence that they're actually looking out for the best interests of their clients.
Well, Danny, I told you before the interview that I knew this was going to happen. We're running out of time, and I have so many more questions. You're just going to have to come back later. But, Danny, can you tell everyone where they can get a copy of Everybody Loses, The Tumultuous Rise of American Sports Gambling? And if you have a website or a social media address you want to give out, please do so.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dave. I hope I wasn't too long-winded, but I love talking with you, and I feel like this is such interesting stuff to dive into. The book Everybody Loses is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can go to, hopefully your local bookstore carries it. My website is dannyfunt.com. I've got a newsletter you can sign up for, keep you updated on my work, because I'm continue to cover this beyond the book. So
great.
If anyone's got a good story about their betting experience, good or bad, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear about it. And definitely, if you read the book, I'd love to hear what you think. So thank you again for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Danny Funt, author of Everybody Loses, The Tumultuous Rise of American Sports Gambling. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this really important issue. I mean, Everybody Loses should be required reading for anyone who's interested in the sports betting industry or anyone thinking about placing a bet, because it's an incredible portrait of how the sports betting industry works. Danny, like I said, I hope we can have you on again, because your insights on the sports betting industry are absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thank you. My pleasure.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time with House of Cards.